if you're a Westerner claiming to be pagan, immediately you are revealing that you are ex-Christian, post-Christian. You probably, well, you must have rejected Christianity if you were ever Christian when you realized what a bunch of hypocrites Christians are, particularly Christian leaders such as the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury. Is there even a patriarch whose name is known to Westerners in the Orthodox Church? Probably not. And so we can only focus on the fact that if you are a Westerner calling yourself pagan, you must be post-Christian, you must hate Jews, and you must hate Muslims. Because why else would you want to go back to the extinct pagan pantheon that you must know was already superseded by Christianity since the 4th century? Why would you do that? You must be a moron. And yes, you are a moron. And maybe you don't care that you're a moron. And that's the other thing too. Why doesn't this person who says he hates Jews, hates Muslims, but knows every now and then to deny it, why doesn't he get it? Because he's a moron, because he's a drunk, because he doesn't really want to do anything that would involve taking any idea seriously. So he retreats into fantasy, stupid video games, stupid movies that he uses to bond with others. Do you like this band? Have you seen this movie? And if you like it, then you're probably my friend. It's that kind of really pathetic way of bonding. And the more I talk to this man, and the more I realise how important it is to have a religion. Because, well, the Jews, they would just, well, certainly the Orthodox Jews, they would just talk about the stock characters of the Torah, Moses, and Pharaoh and Korah and the others. And whether or not you believe in the narrative, you would know the story, and because you know the story, you would have something in common with the other people that you're having a discussion with. But what do Christians have? Christians know they're supposed to believe that Jesus is God, but do they? No, they don't. So they're basically a bunch of hypocrites. The ones who are still trying to believe, well, they're doing their heads in trying to believe in all that nonsense, but still they try, and it's not good for their mental health. And in the meantime, everything is turning to shit. But I guess they can just look away from the world that is turning to shit and pray to Jesus and think that's enough. So that's another kind of irrational behavior that I find so despicable. And the pity of it is actually Western man that is supposed to talk about facts and logic, and now he rejects it because in his dotage, in his dementia, he wishes to return to his childhood and does not want to do anything. And people on their deathbeds, they're not up to much really, and so they gather together and talk nonsense to each other. And when you try and talk to them, I do occasionally just to monitor the depth of the problem, I get, I get terrible misunderstandings. I get the, do you know what they did to us? And, well, why did they let them in? And, and my response is, well, they've let them in. It's happened. And then I'm reminded of this English expression. There's no point crying over spilt milk. But I'm sure the modern Westerner will have not heard of any of these sayings. What is the point of crying over spilt milk? I mean, are you just going to turn back time so you can start again? So, when you come up to World War One, you can say, "Oh no, 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 thanks, World War One, we won't have you," or, then go on to World War Two and say, "No, thank you, we won't have World War Two," and then um, and then the labour shortage after the war. No, thank you. We will deal with it in our own way. That is not importing cheap labour from the rest of the empire. So obviously, it's a really very simple problem of a labour shortage. Your men died and you need people to do stuff. And you thought, hey, why don't we invite cheap immigrant labour from our colonies? They'll be so happy to come here and be so grateful to be here. And this is basically what America does. They assume that the countries that they bomb the crap out of will be happy to come to the West and be the cheap labour and be grateful to be the cheap labour forever and ever. But really, the problem is that Western men and Western women do not wish to marry each other and do not wish to become married parents of legitimate offspring. And their governments do not wish to encourage them to do any of these things. Now, I understand that, not everybody wants to be a married parent, but you don't have to be marriageable to just point out the problem. I mean, I'm sure no one would want to marry me, but it's still true that if you want to raise the low birth rates, if you want to have a proletariat, and you do need a proletariat because stuff needs to be done, you would have to sexually produce them, and afterwards parent, educate, and train them. And this is too long term for these pagans who literally have made an idol of their anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, and blame game. They have made an idol of all these things, and obviously I'm a distraction. They don't want to hear from me what it is that really went wrong and how it could be corrected. But this, the depth of this misunderstanding is so profound. It seems almost unbridgeable, even with facts and logic. Even if these educated people, they've been to university. I'm not even talking about the average. The average the average non-graduate. I'm not even talking about that. I'm these people, they've had jobs in academia, but it is truly disturbing how moronic they are. Perhaps in these spaces they just want to enjoy the full expression of their stupidity. But when somebody tells you he's pagan and he's white and he's post-Christian he's of course advertising the fact that he hates Jews and he hates Muslims because he has rejected organized religion, and obviously doesn't understand his own history, because the biggest beneficiary of organized religion is, of course, the European, because it is the European who has acquired three global empires. So, if you're going to say, if you're going to talk about if you're going to measure the achievement of the European, I guess it has to be measured in imperial measures. And one of the more annoying things is that I did ask this pagan who was rejecting facts and logic whether facts and logic was a white people thing. And of course, some moron interrupted. And of course, the interruption was allowed. And of course, the conversation was derailed because this pagan didn't know whether facts and logic is a white people thing. I think the best point I made was that the non-white people who have crossed oceans and continents to get to the West, will be more invested in saving Western civilization than the indigenous European, because they are, it seems to a man, moronic, drunk, mentally unstable, suffering from learning disabilities, in denial, and wishing to continue in this way because they actually do not wish to face the reality of their predicament. All this could change, of course, if the government were to give the green light. If, for example, they were the powers that be. Now, who are the powers that be? I don't think anybody really knows. I'm saying the ruling classes of Europe are taking orders directly from Washington. They have been chosen specially by Washington, chosen specially by the CIA for their character defects, their lack of principle. And I'm saying all these things could be solved instantly if they had an official moral system. And by that I mean a system that has rules, that has a rule book, that is available to everyone, which is easily understood. But God forbid that simple solutions to long-standing problems can be discussed rationally. MySpace, with a Muslim, a legally trained Muslim woman, was on the subject of the impossibility of reasoning with pagans. Yes, it has echoes of the impossibility of reasoning with women. And the reason for the impossibility of reasoning with either women or pagans is that they are invested in their emotions, which has become a part of their identity. And one of the eureka moments that I got today was that, why do people hate facts and logic? And I think the reason is really quite simple. The facts and logic that they hate and are confronted with, pointed out by other people, are not their facts and logic, but their opinions and emotions, no matter how irrational and moronic, are theirs. And because of their ego, they prefer their dumb opinions to the facts and logic of the wisest sage in the world. And this is something I've also discovered with talking to Vincent Bruno, who um, who cannot seem to accept that as an American he has, well, some duty to acknowledge that the founding fathers are greater men than he ever could be. But no, it's this crazy egalitarian idea that his opinion is as valid as that of George Washington's. And also, in theological debates, there seems to be the school of thought saying God has a mind, he has an opinion, and therefore his opinion is just another opinion. This is the most moronic theological discussion I've ever had. And yes, these atheists who keep asking themselves dumb questions, what is consciousness, and all manner of idiotic questions, just go and listen to them, and that might just put you off atheism. And if you're a hypocrite or an agnostic or really a true believer in the Abrahamic God, well, at least your thoughts would be more elevated in the sense that you would be thinking, what is the rule that I should be obeying? Am I obeying it correctly? Will it be enough to get me to heaven? That would at least be better than the utterly nonsensical questions that they ask themselves as atheists. So really, the problem remains easy to solve as far as I'm concerned. But obviously, I lack the connections necessary to make this point. I imagine there must be a few CIA operatives who might be listening to me, who might also be a little concerned about the direction of their civilization. And Rob, to be fair to him, did say there's good CIA and bad CIA. And this brings me to the subject of divide and rule. Clearly, we should divide and rule the CIA and ensure that good CIA wins over bad CIA. And I'm saying it's really the easiest thing, in theory anyway. So all you have to do to reset the minds of the morons is to allow me to make my points uninterrupted and understood by the people who might be interested in solving their problems with a few ideas. What stops this from happening is all that ego. As I've already explained to you, there are all these men who will be prepared to die on the hill of their emotions and Islamophobia and antisemitism and racism. They would rather do that than submit to facts and logic, which Rob cannot quite decide is a white person thing to do. And I'm saying, of course, it is a white person thing to do, to talk about facts and logic, and obviously it would be a masculine thing to do, submitting to facts and logic and being prepared to have a discussion about the nature and purpose of religion and how it operates. But after all these years, I really can't get through to anyone at all prepared to discuss these things, even people who claim to be religious or Christian or Catholic or anything. They just cannot do it. And it seems astounding that a global empire with, I don't know how many people are supposed to speak English, they can't be found. They can't be found in academia. They can't even be found lurking around on the internet. And so I still don't know. I still don't know if they really don't understand what I'm saying or they're just pretending not to. But I am not about to change my mind about what the problem is. Because the problem is the problem, whether I solve it or not, in my lifetime or not. So I am saying Islam is better than Christianity because of its book of rules, which, if you take seriously, will mean you will read, and if you read it, you will know your rights. It really is as simple as that. And also, it has a verse that supports the First Amendment, and this means that Sharia supports the First Amendment, and this means that it can easily be argued that Islam is more liberal than Christianity. But why don't these Muslims make that point? I think it's because they're stupid or won't use my ideas even though they understand it, or are stupid because they don't understand my ideas, which are very simple because I've made it easy to understand for all these morons out there. So really the problem that I face is the lack of hierarchy. I can't go to the top. There's just no one around me. I know there have been a few people on X who say, go to this space, go to that space. And I have a look and I think, yes, there are quite a few people there, but they're just hoi polloi. They're just stupid people. And there's no point talking to people who won't even show their faces or say their real name. So it's not even bumping along at the bottom. It is actually going underground. But as I say, hierarchy is the most important thing because, if you want to solve a problem, you go to the top. But obviously there's a problem if nobody can tell you who's in charge. And this is precisely the problem. So you would have thought that, some of the geopolitical commentators, people who are wondering what to do with the corrupt and incompetent ruling classes, surely by now they will be talking about why politicians are so corrupt and incompetent. And I'm saying it's because the European has no functioning moral system, because he has no official moral system with codified principles. It's so simple. It's so simple, isn't it? I've said it so many times. I think people should understand what I'm saying by now. But I suppose a lot of them still prefer to pray to Jesus or have themselves another drink. And even for those who do, or who basically space and stream while drunk, all the warnings are in the Quran. Intoxication will be the ruin of many people, particularly those who love it too much. They can't stay sober. What would I do if it were up to me? So I would have to say that penitence is necessary before correction. Because if you don't confess that you are wrong, then you are not truly penitent. Because if you don't publicly admit, or admit at least to some people that you're wrong, you will not have acknowledged your error. So this is necessary for any change of heart to take place. Indeed, there is a verse in the Quran that says Allah will not change the lot of a people who do not change what is in their hearts. And the hearts of these pagans, these pathetic pagans, is their desire to continue worshipping their idols of Islamophobia and antisemitism and racism and chauvinism and sentimentality and stupidity and wanting to die on all those hills, because they are, even if they're not completely elderly, they think like old people in their second childhood, and they do what old people do. They wander around aimlessly. There's actually a verb for it, and I can't remember. They dodder around, that's a word. They dodder around in their dementia, asking themselves the same old questions, and when they are told the answers, they will instantly forget and start asking the same question again after a brief interval. So I am dealing with degeneracy, dementia, and denial. But I think it still could be solved if there was just somebody in charge who cares enough to want to fix a problem. But there isn't anyone in charge who wants to fix a problem. So all these middle class intellectuals and academics, you would have thought that if they were so convinced I'm wrong about so many things, they would argue about it. They would say secular Quranism is stupid. Secular Quranism doesn't even work in theory, and it relies on a premise that is false. What is the premise of secular Quranism? It is that the West is a matriarchy. B, it is degenerate. C, it doesn't have an official moral system, and therefore it doesn't have a functioning moral system, and therefore both its politicians and its voters are completely corrupt. Corruption is ignoring truth. Facts and logic are a survival strategy. Westerners do not appear to have any instinct for survival because they cannot even talk about what it is in theory that is necessary to solve their problems. You would have thought with all the universities and philosophy departments and all these graduates they keep pumping out, that maybe some of them would be in a position to discuss the things I want discussed. But lo and behold, even the people in nationalism are quite simply incapable of engaging with any of the topics I wish to talk about. But even outside nationalism, you would have thought that, these Christians would be able to engage on whether it's idolatry or not. Or you would think Jews and Muslims, who are supposed to take a position against idolatry, would be able to take a position against idolatry, but not really. They can't say it. They won't do it. So it does seem to me that all these Jews, Christians, and Muslims are in fact fake Jews, fake Christians, and fake Muslims, not capable of even obeying the commandment of the, the deity they claim to worship. So I've noticed that with Muslims, when I mentioned chapter 18, verse 4 to them, which commands them to admonish those who claim that God has begotten the Son, even these Islamic scholars, they have to look it up, and when they look it up, they instantly forget, and then they change the subject. But don't these people think that if God exists, they would know? They would know what has taken place in their minds, their denial, their hypocrisy, their conscious desire to ignore what I'm saying and carry on ignoring their moral imperative. So this is what they do. So obviously, all these people who claim to believe in God are in fact hypocrites, all of them to a man. I don't even think I know anyone capable of following the, the chain of logic that I propose. So it seems to me that it is unfortunately true that all these people who claim to believe in God are in fact hypocrites. And then I have to say, the reason why I love the Quran is because it closes off the exits for all these hypocrites, because the Quran says hypocrites are hellbound. But then, if you're really an atheist pretending to be Muslim, you wouldn't care because you don't think God exists to punish anyone for anything. And this leads me to my final topic, which is that the reason why it is necessary to believe in God or pretend or force people to pretend to believe in God is to shame those who are hypocrites. Because if you have a rule system and everybody knows what the rules are, they would be policing each other's morals. And of course, in their own interest, they would be policing the morals of their leaders or those who wish to be their leaders. Having been so many times disappointed by their broken promises, you would have thought that if you still believe in democracy and think you're going to vote your way to the president or prime minister who will finally do what they say they'll do, then you would have thought that these people would care about examining the morals of their leadership candidates. But I don't think they're really capable even of coming to this simple conclusion. So I'm saying, if you have a rule system, you can at least tell if people are breaking the rules or not. Wouldn't that be helpful? Isn't it obvious? Sorry, I'm chewing on a gum. And I'm enjoying the vapors of the menthol acid. fills my mouth and nose, and it's quite nice. So it seems I'm talking to people who need a lesson in, well, who need some kind of remedial class or something. They either do not understand what I'm saying, even though it's clearly in their interest to do so, or they're pretending not to understand. Now, why might they be pretending not to understand? It's because they wish to ignore their moral imperative, which is, if they really did understand, then they would have to do something about it, particularly the men who are supposed to solve problems. But instead, these days, they just hang around in spaces and bitch like women and behave like children. And so, Western civilization is, what's a word if it were patient? Non responsive? The patient is not responsive and probably doesn't want any treatment. They just want to be left on their deathbed to die in peace. They have lost the will to live. But aren't there any people who actually want to survive? You would have thought, people with offspring, that they care about, they might do something, but not a bit of it. They just talk about it. They only talk and they don't put two and two together. And this seems to be a very Western thing, that all these building blocks that they refuse to construct with, all these facts and logic that could lead them to conclusions, because I guess they don't want a conclusion, because they don't want to take action, because they've turned into passive women, these men. And the most important thing about survival is gender roles, because gender roles is important if you want to encourage the practice of marriage, because it is only through the performance of your gender roles, or claims that you will perform your gender roles, that your gender role properly, that will make you a potentially marriageable person. So that is really what is needed. Taking marriage seriously enough to invest in the performance of our gender roles. And even if we're trans, even if we don't want to perform them, surely we can say that it is necessary for these gender roles to be performed for us to be considered marriageable. And that's it. But you see, these old and tired, pathetic pagans, they don't really want to marry anyone, even if somebody of their own race could be found to marry them. And some of them do have children, but maybe they just don't care enough about them, because fundamentally they are nihilists who don't care about posterity. The government could easily make them care and shame them if it only took control. But who is the government? What is a government? Surely it is not Keir Starmer. And I remember reading a very long series of tweets about how unprincipled he is. And of course, Western governments consist mainly of unprincipled people who go to the right schools, who come from the right backgrounds, but who are fundamentally atheists and nihilists with no principles. Now, nihilists are people who are proud that they have no principles, but under my system, nihilists would not have would not have marriage opportunities and would be shunned. And this would cause them to lie. Nihilists do lie in order to get themselves what they want, and what they would want is status. But then with rules, you can tell who's being a hypocrite and who isn't. So actually, however bad things look, problems can still be easily solved in theory.